What we're going to be focusing on today is Amtrak Suspension, Indefinite Suspension, between Seattle and Portland due to the Centennial Mills fire. Then we're going to move on after that to talk a little bit about Centennial Mills itself in Portland and how it basically shot itself in the fucking foot and did this to itself when it came down to the indefinite suspension of Amtrak Cascades. And obviously, of course, the mill itself being set aflame into the third alarm. Then we're going to pop into a brief touch on the Lloyd Center, type of shindiggery-doo. And then after that, we will, of course, make our way to the expose about talking on the W, quote-unquote, aka the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association, asterisk after the W, of course, or I should say attached to the W. We'll get to that as well. Anyway, let's begin. So, as you can see, it's, as of today, August the 9th. In fact, as of just under 3 hours ago, it was officially announced that Amtrak was indefinitely suspending Amtrak Cascades service between Seattle and Portland. And so, as a result, that's a big bummer. And of course, as I already explained, sorry, I have a little bit of I think a piece of barley randomly got stuck in my throat there. I don't know why it just sat there. Anyway, so, as I said in the beginning there, the reason for this is, in fact, the Centennial Mills fire. Centennial Mills, in case you don't know, is located technically right here. In fact, this is the specific building itself, the Centennial Mills building, the main building, that, of course, caught on fire to the third alarm on August the 2nd. August. And everyone died. No, actually, somebody literally did die in that fire, apparently. Or at least somebody was in there that may have already been dead when it happened, because there's a lot of homeless people that lived in there for sometimes well over a decade. Why? Because it's pretty much been abandoned for like 15 to 20 years. And it's just sat derelict and decaying. And being over 116 years old this year, it's definitely going to be in a wicked state of repair, even more so when you're in the Northwest and you're abandoned and ignored and neglected like it has been by the city of Portland. Pretty neat. And you might not think it's quite tall enough to be able to actually, if it collapses, to actually threaten rail service and safety, but apparently that is in fact the case. The state itself has confirmed it. The city of Portland, I'm sure they regret having to admit it publicly, let alone having to even investigate effectively themselves in their own portfolio and say, yeah, it's going to collapse, dude. So probably shouldn't run rail service. And they even told that to, of course, the good old freight rail monopolies that run through this line. And this is Union Pacifico. Here's Union Station right here. I love our Union Station. It might be the best looking Union Station in the entire country. And I don't think it's even fucking close. People love the old Penn Station. They like the new Penn Station. They like... Well, I can't remember the other major station in New York City. They always rave about that. Most people around the world are like, this is the best looking station. I couldn't disagree more. This is so fucking cool. It looks like something kind of out of a fairy tale in a way. It's such a neat architectural wonder, and I just love it. It's such a beautiful, wonderful train station. I love it. And I love how also there's more history to the go by train thing on it, because if you know about the Orange Line and when it released, yeah, it kind of became a meme where people were like, go by boat, because a lot of the Orange Line stations they kept featuring, there's just these random artist built canoes that are just sitting there, wooden canoes, but that's where that came from. It's pretty fun. Wilf. Alright. Anyway, this is the site of the old post office, as you can see. Apparently they still may or may not be keeping one building operational. Apparently they are. Last I had heard, actually, they were supposed to specifically be demolishing the entirety of it and then moving their operations elsewhere, because obviously this is like the main distribution center for the entire area. And as you can see, they successfully demolished everything else. In fact, this is another major building footprint, as you can tell. Right there. There's a little bit of a building's foundation there anyway. So, I mean, like, Union Station's surrounded by a bunch of historic properties. They actually wanted to do the same thing. Portland was being a stickler about it, being like, you have to preserve some aspects of it and reuse it. And then eventually they realized adaptive reuse wouldn't probably work. The USPS did not want that to be done. And well, here we are. So, they demolished it, and then they're like, yeah, it's totally, don't worry, people own it, we're gonna totally redevelop it. And this has been now, I think, since like the mid 2010s that they demolished it, or maybe it was like the very beginning of the pandemic, so like the very beginning of 2020s, and we're still sitting here, and it really does still look like this. It's still completely an empty lot of concrete and asphalt. And then, yeah, of course, the Centennial Mills property right here. You know, this is a newer one. They claim that there's still supposedly 12 buildings in the complex, but that's pretty blatantly not the case. I could potentially see this Largo concrete building being a part of the Centennial Mills complex, but as you can tell, this is a new building, so this is not part of that complex. Now, maybe this is a foundation of a building, or maybe it is like a 1 or 2 floor building that's part of the original complex of 12. But there's definitely not 12 buildings left of Centennial Mills, as you can see, because they keep fucking building all this glass tower fucking modernist pseudo-rich territory in Zootopia here in the Pearl. Therefore, why, of course, as you might expect, especially being right next door to Old Town, Chinatown, which starts pretty much about here, as you can tell by the fucking roof on this thing. Yeah, it's where all the poor people live, and especially those with disabilities, especially mental disabilities or intellectual disabilities, mainly mental. And obviously they also are home to a bulk of the homeless population, transient population throughout here. A lot of the drug users, the heavy drug addicts, love to use especially the Burnside corridor as a hub, which is all down here, because obviously you get to Burnside and Broadway, and you have yourself what you would call Helen Swindells. Yeah, that's right. In fact, there's the Roseland Theater right there. So this, my friend, is what we call Helen Swindells. We always put the S on it. Actually, I don't know if you've noticed this, by the way. If you're not necessarily from the Portland area, we have a intense habit, if we're born and raised in the area, to always add an S to the end of every named place that starts with an S. Savi's Island. It's so difficult for us not to say Savi's Island. It's just Savi Island, but we add an S to the end of it. The same with Helen Swindell. You will never see anybody double take or correct somebody if they say Helen Swindells. They just know what you're talking about, but they never correct it because in their head it probably sounds correct. We always wanted to finish with an S. I'm not sure why. It's just an automatic behavior that is not even taught. It's just there by default. And I have a lot of history with this set of blocks specifically right here because of Helen Swindells, because of my eldest brother Nathan, who lived there for probably about at least half, if not a little over, and I think it is a little over half his adult life, he lived in Helen Swindells. 216, I believe, and then 420 was the main two I remember he lived in. I believe it was 216. No, sorry, it was 220. I think it was 220 and 420 is what it was. I know it was 420 though. And 420 is like right here, I think. I think it's on the corner of the building, is it? No, it actually is. So actually, his 420 is either right here on the 4th story, it's right here on the 4th story. So you get like a direct view to the Bancorp Tower. Getting slightly sidetracked. The point is, I have a decent amount of history in that area, and again, this is where the whole hashtag fuck the Pearl came from, when the Pearl really started to get developed in earnest. It started to take shape, and they just keep building more and more. I mean, this is like one of the newest buildings. This is also one of the newest buildings, and this is one of the newest buildings. And it just sucks because it's for the pseudo rich and the people who are pompous enough because they genuinely insist that they're rich and they're not actually rich, but they think they are, and yet they're probably actually in deep debt. And it's right up against deteriorating, falling apart Old Town Chinatown, where all the poor people, all the homeless, and all the mentally ill congregate, and the drug addicts actually. So that's fun. But anyway, Again, this is the Centennial Mills property right here. This is the building that burnt. And this is the one that then led to Amtrak indefinitely suspending service at a safety caution. Problematically, I don't like how Amtrak's handling this. So they're splitting it into the lines. I would call these runs. I don't know why they're insisting to call them lines. I guess because maybe they don't stop at all the same stations. I'm not entirely sure. But the 511 lines of the Amtrak Cascades are canceled completely with no substitute buses, which I find to be absolutely stupid. 505, 506, 517, and 518 for all trains serving all stations between Seattle and Vancouver, Washington. Passengers coming in and out of Portland will have to get into and from Vancouver themselves. If you know a damn thing about the hell that it is to get, specifically northbound, southbound is not really that bad. Like, in comparison, it's a fucking breeze. But you're going northbound into Washington from Portland on the I-5 bridge, you might as well go fuck yourself and drown yourself in the Columbia, because they're not fucking going anywhere for like 3 hours on average. And I'm not exaggerating, at least in the summer. It is disgusting. You think, oh, I can leave early, well before rush hour and summertime, and I can leave and cross the bridge just fine if I leave from just over here, right, in the west side of the area, to get across the bridge at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You're wrong. Because as soon as you get to I-405 approaching I-5, you're already in parking lot traffic. Crawl to parking lot. And it just gets worse until you get halfway across the bridge and it all magically disappears for no reason into the ether, as if the traffic was never there in the first place. And if you know, and you've experienced it enough, you know that also literally everyone's entering the freeway before the bridge and almost nobody's exiting before the bridge. The bulk of the traffic builds up all the way through the final exit entrance ramps of I-5, just short of the bridge. And so it literally is as if half to 60-70% of the entire traffic that makes it a parking lot and a crawl literally just stops existing at complete random and just disappears into the complete ether halfway across the bridge. And it's always halfway across the bridge. It just stops existing. It makes no sense. I'll never get it. And then you're free breezy, and that makes it even more irritating because you just spent 3 hours approaching the bridge with everybody else jumping on to get across the bridge for them to all just not exist once you're across the bridge. Even though it's not like it added lanes, it's still 3 lanes wide. I'll never understand it. The point is, though, is that this is bullshit at that point, because this is a huge key point that most people still don't know, is that the Oregon segment of the Amtrak Cascades is the entire fucking lifeline and the backbone to the ridership of the Cascades. People genuinely don't believe it because they're like, oh, Eugene, like Cascadia Ultra High Speed Rail. Everybody's like completely ignoring Eugene, and they're like, there's no reason to go to Eugene. There's not remotely enough population. If you actually look at the statistics, if you directly asked Amtrak for the literal ridership percentages and numbers, the Eugene to Portland leg handles, I think it's literally like 50 to 60% of the entire ridership on average. So the average daily ridership of the Amtrak Cascades is just that segment. It's just the Oregon segment. And of course, a lot of people are trying to get even further than just Portland up into Washington again. So to not have buses running from Portland to Seattle and just stopping just across the bridge in Vancouver for no specific reason is utterly fucking moronic. It's actually a logistical nightmare and an optics problem for Amtrak, because the fuck's the point of that? You're already not running them on this either, and now you're not going to run them all the way, even though it's literally practically shouting distance from Union Station in Portland. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And if they really want to maintain that ridership, you know, and keep making their money, they need to fucking do that. Whether they're running their own or they're still doing the contract services, which is really how Amtrak works with their bus services, obviously, is they contract with Greyhound, which is private. Sometimes it's contract with, in the Northeast, it's, what was it called? A Peter Pan? It's called Peter Pan over in the Northeast Coast. For some reason, they have a private company that's called that up there that they contract with. They have, obviously, Flixbus they might contract with here and there if they aren't already doing that with Greyhound and other areas where Flixbus is already operating. They have a ton of options. They could even, if they really wanted to, right? They could contract, and this could build a better rapport and faith, and maybe even get them a bit of a favor in the future if they promote state-ran services, so state Department of Transportation ran bus services, intercity bus services, like, oh, I don't know, Point here in Oregon. They could use that. And then even if it's temporarily where where if Point has extra buses that aren't just contingencies and they can actually spare them, it would be smart of Point as well to be like, hey, let's get some technically paid advertising with the contract, temporary contract and holdover with Amtrak to go run Point services with our Point buses into Washington State, so that even more people realize, hey, Point's also an option for people, which I think is really fucking cool. But like, you could just see how it could literally almost spiral in the positive direction for both Amtrak and also the state dots if they are like Oregon and have Point. So it's actually it's a very good idea, I think, if they did that anyway, just for that reason alone. If you want to look at it only on the business aspect and the optics aspect, if you want to look at it obviously at the passenger aspect, well, it's self-explanatory. Obviously, everybody should be able to catch a bus since the trains aren't running, and it's not Amtrak's fault. It's not Greyhound's fault. It's not anybody else's fault. It's not even the passenger's fault. Obviously, it's the city of Portland's fault for neglecting Centennial Mills. So it makes even less sense at that point for Amtrak to be like, yeah, no, Oregonians can go fuck themselves. Go figure it out. Have fun. And it's like, what? We're stuck riding C-Tran at that point. If we're still riding transit, we're just now stuck in the parking lot in the crawl of traffic over the bridge with on C-Tran, because C-Tran is, I believe, the only one who's still running transit services across the bridge, because obviously Portland ended that, actually, I think like 15 to 20 years ago they ended having any buses going across the bridge into Vancouver. So then you just had C-Tran, and they had, I think, 3 different lines, and now, as far as I know, and I last remembered, they ended all but, I think, 1 line, and they cut back service on that pretty heavily because of expense cuts or expenditure issues. And so that was a problem. And so now it's like, okay, great. So now what? This strands people unnecessarily, and that's why, again, that is why I talk about both of these at length, because it's kind of pertinent to mention. The northbound 502, 504, and 508 lines, and the southbound 503, 507, and 509 lines, replacement buses are being offered instead of trains stopping at all stations between Portland and Seattle. So why on these 4 runs or lines, whatever you want to call it, why are they refusing to run it into Portland? Why is it only for these ones? Like, genuinely, I'd love to understand the attempt at logistical defense for that. That's just, even in terms of marketing and optics, is utterly stupid. And obviously the Cascades is going to run normally between Portland and Eugene and Seattle and the bigger Couve. But yeah, so the Centennial Mills fire is such an easily preventable thing because of the fact that it is entirely due to the city of, it is 100% city of Portland's fault, because they have had this fucking property abandoned, and then they sell it to fucking developers, right? And the problem is that every single time developers finally are like, they're excited, A, to not just purchase it, but B, to actually, like, even sometimes try to restore and integrate pieces of the history of this mill, because it's 116 years old. It's a beautiful idea that these developers, who are usually only for profit, obviously, are actually genuinely looking at and thinking about preserving pieces of the history. Because obviously the building, even before the fire, was already in a pretty derelict state. It was already kind of dangerous, especially below the bottom floor, of course. And so they were still trying to think about, okay, how could we cost effectively try to save even just a floor of this building, if that's even possible, and if not, at the very least, keep and maintain some piece of the history of this 116-year-old mill when we redevelop this. So they're already in good faith. These developers are always pro-profit, and normally they complete. And this is actually a perfect example is the Lloyd Center right now, right? URG, Urban Renaissance Group, and KREF, which I don't currently remember what the heck that exactly stands for. Those are the two owners of the Lloyd Center property, and who are redeveloping it. Yesterday, Saturday, the 8th of August, 2026, was the last day of operations, and they officially permanently closed the doors to Lloyd Center in its entirety yesterday. After 66 years as an indoor mall, for some reason, none of these articles are talking about the outdoor mall history. It was short overall. It was about a decade of it, but it still existed, and guess what was there? The ice rink was still there. And I bring this up because, again, they said, fuck preserving the ice rink, even though everybody and their dead grandmother across the area, that's the one sticking point. That's the one single fucking piece of the mall that people want to keep. And they're like, you don't even have to move it. You can make it a centerpiece. I have an article I wrote about yesterday. I wrote about this yesterday, and I actually mentioned that in there and explained how it would work. And it would make perfect sense because it fits perfectly into their fucking blueprints and plans. And they're just like, no, absolutely, we will not consider it. We will not have it. We have to destroy it. This is what most developers do, especially big name developers that are going to do big projects. Every single one of the owners that Portland has sold the Centennial Mills property to has done everything they can to find out and figure out and plan out and do all this logistical, like, hoop jumping to try to figure out how they can incorporate some piece of history of the mill site and the mill building. Probably the water tower, I have to imagine. But, like, you know, which is a beautiful thing because that doesn't happen. Whether they're local or they're much bigger and not local. The last owner that had owned the mill, that bought it from the city of Portland for like $100 million, something like that, I think it was, the whole mill site, entire property, which does still consist of a couple of other buildings, but this is the main mill site. They had been fighting with the fucking city for the entire time, which is multiple years, that they owned the damn thing. And as of literally this year, earlier this year, after holding it for many years, they finally said, we're done, fuck this. And you can actually literally listen to them, those owners who, by the way, the guy is born and raised in Portland and he lives up in Vancouver. He owns a company up in Vancouver that would be, of course, owning and developing this property, redeveloping it, and incorporating a lot of the history. Because, again, he's from here. It's a point of pride, right? It's a beautiful thing, and it shows he still keeps his roots here. He hasn't forgot his roots. And it's because of the city of Portland, they're such sticklers, they are being dictators over the fucking property. You can go on YouTube to any of our local news agencies, you can watch that interview from earlier this year. I think it was sometime in May is when it happened. It might have been June. If it was extremely, like, very, very beginning of June. But I'm pretty sure it was sometime between mid and end of May of this year, 2026. You can easily find it. I think the one I watched was from Coin, I think. Either that was KPTV. But it was an interview with him and one of his, I think it's a co-founder of his development company up in Vancouver. And he just explained, like, the situation. It was like, here's what our plans were. This is what we wanted to do. We even revised it occasionally, like, even though we didn't really want to do that because it doesn't make logistical sense and it's a lot more expensive for us, we still decided, you know what, maybe let's make this as a compromise and maybe they'll let us finally actually redevelop the property. And then Portland would come back with a bunch of more things and be like, no, you have to check all these boxes too. And they just kept adding boxes that had to be checked to the point that it's just like a dictatorship. The city of Portland has treated the Centennial Mills site as if they have owned it the entire time, even though they keep selling it to other developers. Every single time, the developers say, fuck this, they buy out of it and they give it back to the city of Portland because Portland keeps, even when they sell it off like that, when they have developers and different owners that are not the city of Portland, the city of Portland keeps basically suggesting and pointing out that, hey, we have a full scope plan, a full scope, everything's covered. We have every single step of the process of, you know, the demolition and the redevelopment and where everything needs to go, where we will let this go and not that, and then this can go over there, but we won't allow any of this ever, and then this, that, and that, 5 other things. And they just keep building that list up and up and up. and proving that the city of Portland's already had plans for the site for literally at least a full decade. Likely it is, and it sounds like historically it's been well over a decade that Portland's had very like fully fleshed out development plans, redevelopment plans for the Centennial Mills site. So why isn't the city just doing that themselves then? If they have a fully fleshed out plan for the Centennial Mills redevelopment, why in the fuck isn't the city of Portland just keeping the fucking property and doing it themselves? Because they already have a full-fledged plan. It's fully fleshed out. It has all this detail. Fucking do it yourself. Instead of trying to keep selling it to somebody else who's just going to immediately sell it back to you because you're dictating every fucking term down to the most minute detail about what they're allowed to do. Every single fucking person who has owned the Centennial Mills site since it was first abandoned well over 20 years ago. In fact, it was 2000 is when it would have been abandoned because it was over and done. It was given to the city of Portland, obviously. Ever since 2000, it's been 26 years, it's been over a quarter of a century of this bullshit. It's constantly done this trading of hands between the city of Portland and who they sell it to, and then them giving it back because they keep doing this. The city of Portland will not let it go. They will not just let it fucking go and be like, hey, we really need this redeveloped. It's becoming a huge eyesore. It's becoming a huge danger. It's becoming a nuisance. And there's a lot of more, there's just constantly building up of more and more and more problems and issues right now. We need to have this redone ASAP. We love that you're investing. We love that you bought the fucking property, and that though it's going to cost you a pretty fucking penny because of how derelict it is at this point. You know, yes, obviously we need some say in it because it's our city, right? It's our rules. It's our mandates and everything else, right? Our statutes and stuff. So there's going to be tug and pull, right? There's going to be sway. There's going to be compromise that has to be done between both us and you. But at the same time, we just need this done. We need it done as soon as possible. We want it done as soon as possible. And so, because you're enthusiastic about this, let's sit down together, show us your fucking blueprints and plans, and let's fucking talk about it. And let's come to an agreement, and let's fucking get this thing done. But no. 26 straight years of Portland repetitively smashing their fucking heads into the same brick and the same wall over and over and over again. And when you consider taking the other aspects to the city right now in its current state, full detail, especially the economics of this, because you have to remember, this was given to the city in 2000, 26 years ago. It didn't get like this by itself. This building and the entire Centennial Mills site, it did not get into such a derelict state of disrepair by itself. The city is fully at fault for Centennial Mills getting so derelict and so deteriorated over 26 years that they've had it in their hands. Even when they give it to other and they sell it to other developers in these 26 years, exactly because they literally reject every single fucking thing that these developers have tried and sold and told them, this is our plan, this is our idea. Even when they compromise, they keep firmly rejecting it and saying absolutely not, because that isn't this, and we require this to happen. This is what you must redevelop it as. This is the use for it that you are required to use it for in the new redevelopment buildings, and this is these are all the specifications that we need and require of you to build this at. This is the maximum and the minimum. In other words, we want you to build us with your money what we already have set for 26 years to be built here. That is not fucking how that shit works. You cannot sell it to somebody and then tell them you build what we tell you to. You cannot do that, and that's how you end up in this situation. Besides the fact that, again, Portland is the one who's fully neglected it. Nobody else abandoned it. The developers didn't abandon it. They didn't let it get to this state. The city of Portland did. It's entirely on the city. 100% their fault that it's in such a bad state, and that it's now gotten to such a bad state, such a nuisance, that it's ended up burning up in a 3-alarm fire, which was inevitably going to happen sooner or later, much sooner than later, and now it has. To the extent that it's going to cause even worse economic impact, because now, not just that 26 years of history of you basically telling all these developers you sell it to, you have to do what we dictate, which is that you have to build what we tell you to build here, and only build exactly what we fucking tell you to build. And we will not let you build anything else. You get this. You get the fire, you get it to the point that now nobody's gonna fucking buy it because of that 26 years of that history, and now it has a 3-alarm fire, and it's such a dangerous state that nobody's gonna fucking want to buy it at all from you now. This sealed that fucking deal to where it's not even that as an economically negative impact because of themselves. They shot themselves in the fucking dick and the foot, and then now they're screaming, "Why did you do this to us? You did it to yourself, you stupid idiots." To where now, literally, the backbone of interstate and, in fact, international, regional transit, mass transit, and the Amtrak Cascades, they are indefinitely suspending all rail service between Seattle and Portland, which is a huge economic blow to a city, which is Portland, that it dealt, by the way, it's a huge economic blow. It dealt to itself. I cannot emphasize that enough. It did this to itself. That now is the worst time for it to happen. Why? Because the city is in desperate need of funds. There is such a desperate need to stop the hemorrhaging of funds and debts that the city fucking has on record right now, and just keeps stacking. They're in such terrible, horrific shape economically right now in Portland as a city that they literally are on the brink of bankruptcy, and they've already pretty much mimicked the exact route that Detroit took when they hit their bankruptcy. I'm going to say this here now because it's poignant to mention. I've already mentioned it on Twitter. I will mention it in either a dedicated video and or multiple other videos. Surely probably the latter there. And I will definitely probably mention it in an article. But the city of Portland it's already had its final death rattle. We're in the middle of its final death rattle right now before full-blown bankruptcy. The city is already insolvent because insolvency happens before bankruptcy. That is the truth. And they're already very economically and monetarily insolvent. They don't have funds anywhere. And so as a result, guess what? They've cut 30% of the entirety of Portland Public Schools, that's the school district for the entire city, right? The entire economic fund for the Portland School District, aka Portland Public Schools, which is actually ironically right here, was cut by 30% of their budget, just gone, alongside of over 100 teachers. I think it was actually over 300 teachers got laid off / fired when they cut their budget by 30%. And the reason why they did that is out of a desperate attempt to take the money from the school's budget and from the wages that they'd have to pay and the severance and everything else. They'd have to give the benefits they have to pay for those 100+ teachers that they laid off / fired. So 30% of the Portland Public Schools budget, they've just siphoned off and stolen from themselves. And whatever the fuck 100+ teachers economically would allow them to get back. from paying them, including through benefits. They did that. Simultaneously, the same day they did that, they put under serious consideration, and it's up for vote from, obviously residents in the city of Portland, voters in the city of Portland. I'm assuming it's got to be this November for them to vote if they want, and they're going to allow the city of Portland, the city council, to cut Portland PPB, Portland Police Bureau's, the Portland Police's budget by 50%. Half of the current budget they have now. For the exact same reason. They cut 30% of the budget away, stole it, ripped it away from the school district and the school system of the city and the teachers. Literally just so they could fucking steal it from themselves to try to bandage over, put a Band-Aid, a cheap Band-Aid, on a gaping, bottomless hole where all the money and the funds are going into and getting vacuum suctioned into like a black hole does. They're in that bad of a state. And I don't think a lot of people ever saw this, learned it, or cared at the time. But now is probably the best and most poignant time to remind yourself of this. As of 2 years ago, so 2024, the city of Portland, through their company we call the Port of Portland, who owns and runs and manages the Portland International Airport, that's PDX, HIO, that's Hillsborough Airport, and even Troutdale Airport, plus Swan Island over here and up through all of this. This is specifically Swan Island, and then of course up through the rest of the ports, all throughout here, all on the mouth, and obviously all through here up to about roughly Delta Park. They indefinitely, as a familiar bird, see, I read bird. They indefinitely, a familiar word that they love to use recently, or that's being used in Portland a lot recently, apparently, economically, is they indefinitely stopped all 100% of container shipping in Portland at the port. This is the boring, unsexy stuff, but it's important to know, especially now with how economically derelict the city of Portland is right now and desperate they are. Because, again, you have to remember, and again, this is why it's so important, is the fact that the mass bulk of shipping traffic in this country on ships is container shipping. It's container traffic. Portland indefinitely ended, 100% ended, and stopped all 100% of container traffic in and out of the port because it was literally losing the money. Because they're stupid, just like the owners of SeaTac, the airport up in literally SeaTac, Washington, are when it comes down to everything tarmac related. All operations, ground operations, bag operations, handling operations, everything is third-party contractors. And you wonder why they're so egregiously dysfunctional at SeaTac on ground ops. The city of Portland did the exact same, had the exact same situation going on with their ports and the contracts with third parties to handle container ops. To where the city literally admitted, and again, you can find these articles very easily as well. The city of Portland literally admitted, and the Port of Portland, therefore, literally admitted that they have no knowledge, personal knowledge themselves, that it would require to do their own container ops, which is why they always use third parties. And again, this is like 60 to 70% of all shipping traffic in the United States of America is container traffic. Astoria does not have a port that's capable of that either. It's minute, like the city. So go figure, they can't do that there. You can't do it in freaking Boise, or you can do it in Boise, or not Boise, sorry, up in Lewiston. You can do it in Lewiston, Idaho, because it's the furthest inland deepwater port, I think it was in the world, deepwater seaport in the world officially, is here in Lewiston, Idaho. It's North Lewiston specifically, of course, and South Lewiston a little bit. Literally, it's the world's furthest inland, or either as the continent's furthest inland deepwater port. Deepwater seaport, sorry, I need to specify that. Deepwater seaport is here in Lewiston, Idaho, which of course relied heavily, those ships, on stopping over in, I don't know, what's somewhere called Portland, Oregon. Well, now they can't do that, and they haven't been since, 2024. Again, this was to save money. Notice how this has been going on since at least 2024, probably before that. But that was the first major big break, and oh shit. They're grabbing the oh shit handle, and they're like, fuck. We're going insolvent, and we need something desperately to save us money. And though they ended literally the most profitable form of fucking shipping indefinitely. And of course, it still hasn't even been talked about or reconsidered since, for very obvious reasons, mind you. So all of this to say that, because yes, it all still has to do and ties directly back into this whole Centennial Mills situation. Because again, they don't have arguably the backbone of transits, regional, international transits between Vancouver, British Columbia, and Canada, and of course Eugene, Oregon, in the Amtrak Cascades anymore. It just cannot function. Therefore, you're fucked. You've lost a huge economic driver, all because you're too fucking stubborn and too dictatorial over what happens to a 116-year-old abandoned for 26 years and very deteriorated and derelict building that now has had a 3-alarm fire. Again, entirely the city's fault. Own fault. That now nobody, along with that track record, is ever going to fucking want to touch. You're never going to be able to sell it again. And as I said today about it on Twitter, when, again, the announcement about Amtrak suspending service was officially shared by somebody that I follow on there, TriMet Scanner, that city of Portland's got to be feeling real fucking dumb right now. And they really got to be reeling about this, because I genuinely believe this. I would not be remotely surprised if the city of Portland actually hired somebody to commit arson on the Centennial Mills building because of how much it's hemorrhaging the money. This property alone, this one building, has cost Portland ridiculous millions a year because of their stubbornness for 26 fucking years. And also, again, like I said, completely abandoning it. The city did that. None of the developers did. The city did that for 26 years. So, you know, the city owns an insurance policy on the Centennial Mill site, and thus the building. And so, obviously, I would not be remotely surprised if it turns out the city of Portland, in fact, hired somebody to commit arson on the building, because they themselves are just sick and tired of fucking dealing with this 26 years straight of trying to dictate to developers they sell it to build what they, the city, demand them to build. And they only allow them to build that, which is why they've never successfully allowed any development. It's never done anything with it. You get to this point, 26 years later, you're so desperate for money, you're insolvent economically, you're about to go bankrupt, you're cutting your fucking school system's budget by 30%, firing over 100 teachers so you can literally steal that money to fill the fucking bottomless pit that all that fucking money is going into to start your bankruptcy. to try to fucking plug it, and it's never gonna work, of course. Detroit already tried this kind of shit. They did this exact fucking tactic before, these exact type of things, ending container traffic 2 years ago permanently in the ports, where they just will not touch it because it was costing too much, because they're stupidly using third parties, because they literally admitted publicly, we don't have the ability to fucking do anything. We don't have the knowledge it takes to do this ourselves. So we're just going to end it permanently when it's 60% of the fucking country's traffic for shipping. It's the most profitable form of shipping. And you want to cut your police budget by 50%. And you're dead serious about that, to steal that money from the police to also try to use it to desperately plug the hole that the other cuts did not plug. And they never will. So I guarantee this is akin to the fucker who owned the Twin Towers, and I think it was 1 month, I believe it was, right? Prior to 9/11 happening, conveniently, he takes out a multi-billion-dollar insurance policy on the buildings. 1 month before 9/11 happens, conveniently. Of course, totally coincidental, right? Naturally, of course. That's what we're required to believe, right? This is exactly the same kind of thing. I would not put it past the city of Portland to be that fucking, let's face it, corrupt. And they probably hired somebody to commit arson on Centennial Mills on the 2nd of August of this year, 2026, so that they could take an insurance policy out on it. And they probably didn't count on it being a 3-alarm fire that literally caused it to collapse to the where now it's so dangerous and so all but inevitably going to collapse that it literally has indefinitely, if not potentially permanently, shut down the Amtrak Cascades operations, which is a huge economic driver for you. And Union Pacific, who owns this right away, afraid of monopoly, is conveniently, of course, not going to be able to do much with it. Because though they restarted services against the city and the state's inspection notice saying that it's too dangerous to do, they're like, no, we're doing it no matter what. So deal with it. But they're doing it in limited fashion. Union Pacific is only running limited freight cargo runs through this stretch past Centennial Mills. Amtrak won't do it because it's too dangerous. And here we are. So that's something I really wanted to mention, because I trust me on this. I know most people think it's like, you're just a fucking crazy lunatic if you think that. You're a fucking dumbass. But no, I'm serious. Like, you're seeing things that aren't there. I guarantee you, the city of Portland hired somebody to commit arson on that building to take an insurance policy out on it, and now they realize how badly it's backfired on their ass. $116 years of history that's now forced to be permanently gone. I mean, just think about that. It's just disgusting. It's absolutely insane. Oregon Encyclopedia updated this fucking quick, too. In August 2026, a fire engulfed the building. Crown Mills, of course, was the original name of Centennial Mills. In 1949, as you saw up there, it rebranded to Centennial Mills, and it's stayed that ever since. Got your old pictures here, the Centennial Mills site. You can see how it, the other buildings, because there's 12 total buildings in the complex. You can see how it was all there. I think this is, in 2015, this is what it was, but they shot it still in grayscale for some reason. It's kind of stupid. 2015 on the internals. I mean, yeah, look at that. You can already see how the damage and the dereliction was happening, how fast it's deteriorating. That is yikes. It's probably a lot of paint peeling, I bet, too, but not in a happy state. I wouldn't step anywhere near that. That's gonna collapse if you touch that, and that's before fire, obviously. Man. It's so sad because there's so much history. 116 years of history, it's all. It's sure it's still standing, but for how long, right? That's the thing. Everyone knows it's going to collapse inevitably here very soon. It's just, how long is it going to take? So, I suppose, naturally, the next topic to move on to would be that Lloyd Center uh, touch up, or touch on the Lloyd Center, because obviously yesterday, August 8th, Saturday, August 8th, 2026, the Lloyd Center. I like to pick on English, so I have to say Lloyd Center. I'm going to drive myself ballistic if I don't. The Lloyd Center officially shut down for the final time. It locked its doors for the final time. And as expected, honestly, everybody yesterday showed the fuck out. I hate myself for not taking more due diligence to actually look up and verify what the last day of operation was going to be sooner, because I only looked it up literally yesterday at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like, well, fuck, because Saturday services obviously on TriMet are cut back from normal services. Not as bad as Sundays, but they're not great. And yeah, I would just take the max directly out here to Wabam, the 11th. I always thought it was 14th for some reason. The 11th. And I actually always remembered I've been to this for movies twice, both in my childhood, and I still remember it. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on it a little bit because as of tomorrow, as of today, technically, because it's completely shut down, URG, that's Urban Renaissance Group, and KREF, which I don't recall what KREF stands for at the moment. Actually, I put it in my article, but they're planning on officially doing this with the property. And you can see this is where, as you can tell, the good old-fashioned Loverboy. Oh, sorry, my bad. The Queen reference by accident. There's definitely intentionally. I'm like that. I'm annoying. Anyway, the as you can see, this is where the theater is. That exact theater I just pointed out over here, right? Have some memories there. My memories. Oh god, they're leaking. Oh, whoops. What? Why did? Okay, I didn't know Blogger did that. That's not great. I don't like it. The ones that you click the picture and it just switches to the next photo. But that's where the theater is, and believe it's. I know it's Multnomah. Is where the old Nordstrom was. I swear it's like right where this building is, but it actually might be over here. Yeah, let's see. No, it would be in this building, right about here. I think is where the old Nordstrom was in Lloyd Center, and they're already under construction. That old property to become a 4,235, I believe it was, so 4,235 seat concert venue. And thank God it's not the stupid Live Nation thing, because that's apparently somewhere on the southeast waterfront. So just due southwest of here, of this exact spot we're looking at. But I think this is actually the old Nordstrom building. I'm pretty sure. Specifically right here. No, sorry. It would actually be over here, because I remember looking it up, and it was like somewhere around here-ish was where that was. So yeah. Either way, even if it's right here, I know they said it was directly on Multnomah, and this looks like this would. I mean, this is the right size for a big box store like a Nordstrom in the first place, especially from the heyday of Nordstrom and Sears and JCPenney and all those other Meyer and Frank and Montgomery Ward. Don't get me started on Meyer and Frank and Montgomery Ward. But yeah, anyway, because I have a lot of fond memories in those stores out here in the West Side. But or now there's a Chuck E. Cheese that was already in that building as well, that then moved north towards Canyon, and then obviously we have a Home Depot there where Montgomery Ward's was, and actually I think the Meyer and Frank, and obviously the Chuck E. Cheese, but the Charles E. Cheese. But yes, anyway, what the fuck was I gonna talk about Lloyd Center for though? There was something I wanted to touch on about it. I can't even remember at this point if it was actually this whole redevelopment plan. But I do know, in correlative to this though, and it actually correlates with Centennial Mills and actually Montgomery Park, aka I say Montgomery Ward is what it was. Though I think it was the old Myron Frank building is actually what that was, the headquarters, because Myron Frank was headquartered in Portland for the longest time. I can't remember if it was founded in Portland, but I know it was headquartered here for a long time. But then Montgomery Park, we think. Yes, okay, it was Montgomery Ward. It was a Montgomery Ward complex and building. So I guess they must have had their headquarters here too or something. Because, I remember this now, because the story behind the Montgomery Park sign is that it originally was Montgomery Ward. And then when Montgomery Ward went out of business and the property got sold to the next owner, he's like, what's the cheapest possible thing it could do? Replace the W and the D on Ward with a P and a K, because AR is already there. And that's all he did. He just fucking swapped the W and the D of Ward for Montgomery Ward out for P and K for Montgomery Park. It's actually pretty funny. Anyway, yeah, actually that's interesting. I didn't realize that. That's actually kind of cool though, to like stumble into that, realize, oh, I guess maybe they were both headquartered here. I didn't realize that. I knew that Montgomery, or Myron Frank was though. But anyway, it's correlated with this though a little bit because of the ice rink, right? The ice rink, like I said, is the biggest sticking point for everybody and across the entire Portland metro region. I think even, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of long-time living families and people and generations here up in Clark County in Washington, Southwest Washington, actually also are in on the whole thing. We're like, I want to save this. I want to save the damn ice rink. Because it's like the epicenter of Lloyd Center. Everybody in the day grandmother was fucking going to the ice rink, or at least everyone has a fond memory of being able to go to, when they go into Lloyd Center, it's just, they look at it, right? And you just end up watching for a long time. You're like, it just has the best feeling to go into a mall, and then there's just this great, beautiful communal centerpiece that's always active with people, and it's an ice skating rink. It's unique, it's fun, it's cool, it's awesome, and again, it is the single oldest part of the entirety of the 25.6 acres that is this, not counting these parking lots clearly, but is the Lloyd Center Mall lot, right? And it's technically 24 acres is this lot. And then the 1.6 is obviously where the theater is now and is going to turn into, apparently, again, these feckers. This, though, is 24 acres in size, the actual mall property, right? And again, that's this full thing right here. This whole thing is 24 acres. And this is 1.6 acres. And this whole thing, right? In the dead center, right where this is actually, is where the ice rink is, right? Again, every single floor opens up in the dead center around the ice rink because it's the centerpiece. Because it's also therefore in the dead center of the property, and again, URG specifically, this is where I actually got this from, right? They're emphasizing how the new street grid in here, even though this one shows the normal street, same with this one, that the new street grid in here is supposed to be not like this, and it's actually supposed to be pedestrian avenues, right? It's supposed to be pedestrian only streets, which is great. So like, that's cool. But also they're emphasizing the parks, and then universally you can tell they're emphasizing the central plaza and the central park in the middle of the new community. Guess what? This is literally where the fucking ice rink is. Leave the ice rink. You know, it's completely fucking free. Urban Renaissance Group, KREF, it's completely fucking free. You don't have to do anything. It doesn't cost you a fucking penny to preserve and maintain the crown jewel of the Lloyd District and the Lloyd Center that is everyone's favorite, the ice rink, the historic ice rink, the one that was there before Lloyd Center, as we know it now, ever came to be, because it was originally an outdoor mall before any buildings were built. Guess what was the first thing that was there? The ice rink. Everybody's attached to the ice rink. You could, for 100% free, you can just tear everything else down, get rid of everything. You can throw it all away if you don't want to recycle it, but you can keep for 100% free the ice rink. It's in the dead center of the complex. The entire buildings were all built directly around it, so it's wide open. Literally the foundations and the pillars and every like maintaining structure that would be the most expensive to demolish is literally built around the damn thing. They're anchored around it. It's the heartbeat, the apex, the crown jewel of Lloyd Center and the Lloyd district in the dead center of it. You want your parks in the dead center. This is a huge point of emphasis for you in this redevelopment, right? This is what it's supposed to look like. The ice rink would be right here. You could keep it for free. Everything else goes. You can build everything else you want. It's now the centerpiece of the park and the entirety of the new mixed-use neighborhood. Dense, may I add, mixed-use neighborhood. So now everybody who's lived here the whole time, no matter how far across the metro area they come from, to cherish and enjoy the ice rink, now it's back outdoors, which, by the way, is going to draw a lot more of us locals to it because it's in a park in the outdoors in a lush, treed-in area, which is like the quintessential Pacific Northwest and Oregonian thing, right? And especially Portlander thing ever, right? It's going to be right here, pretty much where the tree is actually in this render. And the entire rest of the trees and all the park are going to be here. All the buildings are still going to be here. Now you can actually do this instead. You can reorient the parks and you can surround it with these buildings. And your primary businesses, right, your main anchor draws for tourists and locals alike, right? Businesses on the bottom floors, those are the buildings and those are the businesses that you should surround that park and that ice rink with. And again, you can do it entirely for free. It doesn't make any sense to just say, we refuse to hear anything about it. We're just not going to accept it. We have to demolish everything and completely get rid of the ice rink. It just doesn't make any sense. It's 100% free. Now, here's all the more reason why I want to emphasize the ice rink and how it associates with Centennial Mills, how it associates with also how I'm going to go into the next topic with these things, with these two historic sites in Portland, as well as next door neighbor, Albina, and obviously the Northwest Industrial District and the Montgomery Park neighborhoods that I had just mentioned probably 5 to 10 minutes ago. And that is that the city of Portland has a major fucking obsession with fucking it up over and over again. They keep repeating the exact same mistake and error every single time, which is to just completely destroy and decimate and get rid of all their historical land, all their historical buildings, and just let it be completely redeveloped and torn apart and gotten rid of. No plaques, no memorials, no museums, no commemorations, nothing. And then they wonder how people have forgotten the city's history. They wonder how a lot of communities, especially those communities usually, are the most upset and they never let it go. It's because you are destroying an entire cultural hub and nexus and focal point of the entire heartbeat and lifeline that this city has had. That the entire metropolitan area was built around, for fuck's sake. You did that with Vanport. So right now, historic Vanports, there's like a building and then there's some plaques and a wall of text. Good job. There's nothing left because you developed the western portion of it into a park with Smith and Baby Lakes. You developed the southwestern portion of it into PIR, Portland International Raceway. Then on the north side, you developed the Expo Center and that part of Delta Park. And then to your east, you, I don't know, have a massive honkin' 6-lane fucking freeway? And that's all you have. So literally, historic Vanport is like some plaques, walls of text, maybe some few pictures with it, and a building. Smashed between Interstate 5, Columbia Boulevard, and I can't remember the north-south one that goes from St. John's all the way up into the north end, or to the shore of the Columbia River. For some reason, I never remember that. And then obviously the Expo Center in the north, Smith and Baby Lakes, and obviously the Portland International Raceway on the west. And it's just this sliver of land that's stuck between all this stuff in what is admittedly currently one of the most dangerous and worst and most depreciated neighborhoods in the entire city, which is Delta Park. That is also highly industrial right now still, and it just doesn't make, like, nobody wants to go there. This is why also the city's also struggled with being able to get anybody to want to go all the way into the Expo Center for events. to where literally also actually it was this year, they finally actually had talked about it publicly a little bit, and they're like, we need to figure out what to do with the expo center because it's just costing us way more than we can make from events, because nobody wants to go to Delta Park. Nobody wants to have the inconvenience of having to commute using I-5 or maybe using Germantown down to the St. John's Bridge if you're on the west side, and then into where that is or whatever, you know. It's all absurd. But again, you didn't preserve jack shit realistically with Vanport. It literally is actually the literal fucking foundation, the first fucking ever attempt at building what is now the city of Portland. We wouldn't have Portland if it wasn't for the failure of Vanport, and you just have plaques stuck between a freeway and a raceway and a bad neighborhood. It's like the most logistical nightmare for anybody to access in the entire area, actually. It's so stupid. So they did that with that. Then they did it with Albina when they destroyed Albina for, oh right, the fucking freeway again. And then the Rose Quarter, amongst other things. I think Emmanuel also took over and demolished a huge chunk of Albina, I'm pretty sure. And so now Albina is pretty much half the size it ever was. And even then, they're like, okay, I guess we'll let the pissed off residents of Albina decide, hey, let's go and preserve some of the history if we can. And so that happened, but it wasn't the city who did it, because they're just like, let's redevelop it because money. And then now we're going to have the Lloyd district for that with the Lloyd Center's redevelopment. They're happily letting the fucking URG and KREF redevelop it without preserving a single piece of the history of that district and that mall and the ice rink and Centennial Mills. That's 116 years old as of this year and this month. And in 2026, it's 116 years old. 116 years old building, the main mill building, that is now about to completely collapse due to fire and just neglect. Because again, like I kept saying earlier, the city has abandoned it. They've had it abandoned completely for 26 years, because the last time it was used as an actual mill was in 2000. Y2 motherfucking K. And they just haven't let developers that they sell it to do shit with it. Because they want it their way and only their way, which is to have those developers build what they want, the city wants them to build. And so they keep getting it back, and then it keeps losing them more money, and then they keep still doing nothing with it. They don't do investments, they won't redevelop it themselves, they won't do anything. And so it's literally abandoned by the city for 26 years, over a quarter of a century, even though it's 116 years old as well. It's a historic site. It's on the waterfront, just north of downtown and Old Town. Like, it doesn't make any sense that they would do that, but they're just like, Portland's like, well, who cares about this property? And so that goes to shit. And now there's not going to be anything that's going to be able to really realistically be preserved at Centennial Mills. But now they don't really have a choice to be able to redevelop it on their own, because again, like I said, that track record of 26 years of this bullshit of that they keep pulling with developers, and then that already says to developers, don't buy this land, don't buy Centennial Mills, because they won't let you do literally anything with it unless you buy it for, you know, $120 million was the last sale for it. I think it was $120 million that developer bought it for. They held it for like a damn near a decade, and the city of Portland's like, you have to build what we tell you to, and you can only build that. We will reject with emphasis and prejudice anything you propose if it's not exactly what we are dictating you build, which isn't how that works. And so now it has a three-alarm fire and 26 years of abandoned neglect by the city, and it burns. They don't have a choice at this point. They're stuck with the fucking mill property in the building that's about to collapse. They're going to be stuck with a disaster that's going to cause it. They don't demolish it before it collapses. So now the city has to own up to it. It has to truly own the property and be like, fine, I guess we'll tear it down at least. If not, I should redevelop it. So that's a fun thing. And because of the fire, again, like I said, right, that's really relates to this topic, they're not going to be able to do anything with really preservation anymore. It was the last proper building of the historic mill, 116 years old. It's destroyed. It's decimated because of their neglect that they've given to it, or they haven't just completely ignored it. They've abandoned it completely for over a quarter century, and then it burns. So we're not going to have anything there. That's like Albina. That's like the Lloyd district and Lloyd Center. And that's like, of course, Vanport. But there's another place. And it's actually combined through Montgomery Park, mainly Montgomery Park, but also a little bit of the Northwest Industrial District to the north, or well, yeah, to the northwest, west northwest, technically, and that is the history in those neighborhoods. Because before it was a developed industrial park that we know it today, and we have known it for decades upon decades. In fact, I think about a century now, it's been just an industrial park along the Willamette River. And before, therefore, it was the headquarters for Montgomery Ward or Mine and Frank. Montgomery Park in the Northwest Industrial District had the second ever high-capacity professional baseball stadium in the entire world built there. It was home to literally the second ever professional baseball stadium in this world. That's a wicked cool kind of piece of history right there. Because, as you'd probably guess, the one that was built before it, the very first one in the world, well, that was Yankee Stadium. The original, old Yankee Stadium in New York City. And just shortly after they opened that, Portland completed theirs. And I can't remember the exact number. I actually recommend you do this. Is head over to, on YouTube, head over to Steve the Historian on the U-Schloobs. Because Steve the Historian does a lot of great local videos on the history of the Portland area, especially Portland proper. He's recently output one that was, well, actually, a 2-hour history dive on the Lloyd Center, but it was the latest one I saw. But he also output like secret staircases of Portland, and he obviously did one on Montgomery Park, and also actually Centennial Mills in this whole area, including the property here outside of Union Station, which is the old massive distribution facility for the United States Postal Service, USPS. But yeah, and then obviously Northwest Industrial District outside of it. Dove Lewis is still here. Anyone want to go to extract a stupid sewing needle that your dumb orange cat swallowed when you were a child? Yeah, no, okay, no, just me. All right. Anyway, yes, that really happened, by the way. In the Montgomery Park / Northwest Industrial District, and I'm actually, because there's Good Samaritan. I did not remember Good Samaritan being that far northwest. It's actually kind of interesting. I'm actually trying to find where Montgomery Park is. You'd think that it would be pretty well labeled, but obviously this is all Pearl. I don't remember, and I hate that I don't, because I have actually pretty good childhood history with Montgomery Park too. And actually, speaking of one of its historic headquarters, because Montgomery Park was home to CTR, which was actually, at the time it went bankrupt, I think it was 116 years old. Which is an interesting little parallel to Centennial Mills being 116 years old now, and being now not just derelict and falling apart, but also collapsing because of a fire. Which is obviously, as you can see, incredibly close by. There, once upon a time, was a company named CTR. It was over 100 years old, and it was a technology company. It was a technology company since it was founded 116 years prior. The company went bankrupt and shut down operations in 2003. 23 years ago. And it was over 100 years old then. It was either 106 or it was 116. I can't quite remember. I think it was actually 106 years old. at the time, and my dad worked for them. He was their chief and lead software engineer. And then a family friend of ours named James, it's not his actual technical name, but he's always gone by that here. He was basically my dad's understudy. So his like assistant slash whatever the heck you call that, under whatever the next level below a chief architect, software architect, chief leads software architect for the company was. Whatever you call that position, that's what he was. And my dad single-handedly bankrupted the fucking company because he's an arrogant fucking dick. But anyway, and for some reason, yeah, the owners, for some dumb reason, were like, you know what would make sense? Let's keep letting them bankrupt us. And they just let themselves go bankrupt. But it's a historic company, and I guarantee you've never heard of CTR. There ain't nobody in Portland that's ever heard of it, unless you worked for CTR. Then you've heard of it. But yet it was headquartered here. It was founded in Portland, and it was headquartered in Montgomery Park the entirety of its existence, all 106 years, before it went bankrupt by my dad's hand in 2003. That's history nobody learns about. They don't know that there was which is crazy to think because it's a technology company. It was a technology company that was founding in the 1800s. It was headquartered its entire existence right here in Montgomery Park in Portland, right? 106 years old. My dad bankrupts it single-handedly. But the point is, that's history nobody knows about. You can't find a fucking article unless you worked at CTR, apparently, in my experience, because again, my dad worked there. He's the only person that even knows when I reference CTR. Nobody but my family members even now know what the fuck I'm referring to when I say CTR, and I'm referring to Montgomery Park, which is wild because you can't. How do you have a 100-plus-year-old company headquartered in your city the entirety of its existence? So it started in the 1800s, and it goes out without even a whimper or a single blurb in a newspaper, and the only people who ever knew about it somehow are the people who worked in it and their family members. It's just a weird thing, but like the point is that that's a history that should be preserved and should be spoken about. I mean, you should have some sort of pride in that, but for some reason, Portland as usual is like, oh well, anyway, redevelop it. Like, nothing happens with this. They did that with Albina, like I said. They did that with Vanport. They're going to do that with Lloyd Center now. They're doing that with Montgomery Park. Thankfully, they're at least keeping the Montgomery Park sign. They're going to try to keep that in the historic building and repurpose it in the redevelopment of the neighborhood. You can tell I've been talking for a while because I haven't drank enough water because I'm starting to croak like a frog. It's being strangled. Pretty soon I'm going to have to start shaking and imitate RFK. Jesus Christ. Anyway, but yeah, so Montgomery Park has so much more history than just, there was a tech company that was 100 plus years old who went bankrupt in 2003 that nobody knows about. There was, the Montgomery Wards was headquartered there. That's how you got Montgomery Park. And that whole history of the sign changing from Montgomery Ward to Montgomery Park because it was cheapest to just replace the W and the D, which is such a funny and quirky and fun little piece of history there. But also Meyer and Frank being based in headquartered in, I think it was actually about Pioneer Square is where they were headquartered, but still, and people only think of that and they're like, it's always been an industrial. It has not. It was literally, like I said, it had the second oldest professional baseball stadium this world's ever seen. It had a huge capacity for the time period and how little population Portland and the region actually even had for the late 1800s. And it was literally the late 1800s that it was built and showed up in Portland. And yet it had, I think it was a capacity of, I know it was over 5,000. And I think it was like 8,000 something, I think was its capacity. It was like 12,000 seats was the capacity of this professional baseball stadium. Literally just barely younger than the original first ever baseball stadium ever built in the world, which was Yankee Stadium. But nobody knows about it. That was in Montgomery Park. But you know what happened before that? Actually, just after that, rather, they hosted the World's fucking Fair of 1908. There was a whole World's Fair site right here in Montgomery Park. Right fucking here, guys. Right fucking here. We hosted the World's Fair in 1908. Right here in Montgomery Park and the Northwest Industrial District. Like, seriously, I wish people knew that stuff. But Portland just redevelops places and they don't maintain that history. And when they do, they barely maintain most of it. They don't keep any of the historic pieces of the buildings. They don't keep any of the memorabilia. They don't keep any of the photographs usually. And they leave it up to the fucking citizens to preserve it into perpetuity. And to almost like force the city themselves and its officials to actually give enough of a fuck eventually to actually be like, okay, fine. We'll make something, a plaque that commemorates, oh, there was a baseball stadium here, cool. Which hasn't happened yet, by the way. But I believe as either the Oregon Historic Society or as the Portland Historical Society, they actually have what little is left of photographs and documentation of that baseball stadium and obviously the World's Fair site. And again, you have to remember, the World's Fair, especially back then, was sprawling. The majority of what we know as Montgomery Park was actually a World's Fair expo. It was full of those buildings. And you don't know that. You never fucking knew that because the city does not take pride in its history for some stupid reason. They have to be forced by its citizens to acknowledge its own history. We hosted 1908 World Fair right here. We had an entire site that was a World's Fair site, and it was super state-of-the-art for 1908, right? As World's Fair sites always are. It sprawls, it takes up most of the neighborhood that we call Montgomery Park today, but you don't know that because they don't teach it because they don't care about it because it's the city of Portland. Not only that, but you go before that, and that's before the baseball stadium, there was actually a big fucking wetland lake. The mass majority of this whole area right here, in the Northwest Industrial District and a bit of Montgomery Park was a big ass lake. It was a big fucking lake. A big natural fucking lake. Beautiful fucking lake. There's still somehow wonderfully preserved photographs due to citizens who actually give a fuck about the heritage and what it took to make Portland what it is and what it became at its peak, because we are long past Portland's peak. Thank God we have that, and people have always had pride in the history of the city, because if they didn't, we would never have ever learned that we had the second oldest baseball stadium in the world, professional baseball stadium in the world, literally that was freshly opened just barely after the original Yankee Stadium, the first ever baseball stadium in the world, was built. We would have never known that we hosted the 1908 World's Fair and what that fucking looked like. And we would have never known that we had a giant natural lake where all this stupid industry and port infrastructure is right now, and even a bit of, again, Montgomery Park is now. We would never known that if it wasn't for the citizens throughout the city's history being the sole figures who fucking took pictures, maintained and upkept memorabilia, and have taken pride in it ever since, because the city doesn't give a flying fuck. It's really fucking stupid. It's so stupid that nobody fucking seems to know any of this history about our own damn city. I say our own city. Obviously, I've never lived in Portland. I've always lived out home the west side of the Portland. Actually, literally, this area right here is all I've ever lived in my entire life. So, you know, I say our city. It's technically not literally my city, but you know. it's the core heartbeat of the metro area. So naturally, it's the hub, it's the nexus, as all metro areas are, and their main cities. So obviously, it's still technically our city, even if I never lived there. But anyway, so I just wanted to point that out. Like, that was the third thing I wanted to talk about. Call it a third segment, if you will. And so I'm also thankful for people, not just like the Portland Historical Society and the Oregon Historical Society, but obviously also the people like Steve the Historian on YouTube, right? Because he's making it that much more accessible. Because I didn't even know about it. You couldn't have fucking... I don't think I could have ever discovered it on my own. Just being curious and looking it up on a search. Pick your search engine. You know, I could have never could I have found it on my own. I already know that. Most people never would have. And clearly most people who love history, and they love the history of the city and this region, never learn about it. Even when they're searching for the history, they don't see it. And it's so sad. So it's you have to be thankful to those people, because I didn't know about it until Steve the Historian literally released a video on YouTube that was in Montgomery Park and the Northwest Industrial District that cased all that history and made it accessible universally, to where you learn about it by seeing the pictures, by seeing video clips and everything else, while he makes the history of this area so accessible to where there's a fucking natural lake that was there. How the fuck were we supposed to know that when the city doesn't care? There was a fucking, literally almost as old as the original first ever baseball stadium in the world, Yankee Stadium, was fucking here in Montgomery Park. But nobody knows that, right? That's why you have to be thankful that people here have always taken pride in the city's history and its heritage from when it started. Because the city has never cared, and that's why they've done what they did with Albina, that's what they did with Vanport, that's why they are going to do what they're doing with the Lloyd District, and what they're about to do in Montgomery Park. It takes us to have to fucking preserve our own damn history, and it's really sad. But think about, it's been since the late 1800s that citizens here have been consistently upkeeping it. They've been maintaining photographs. They've been doing all this. They've been documenting it. They've been keeping all the history alive. So we learn about a giant fucking natural lake. We learn about the World's Fair of 1908 and how it took up almost all of this after they had just filled in the lake so they could build the World's Fair site. And then you have, obviously, the baseball stadium, and then all this other stuff that you'd never know if it wasn't for people keeping it alive, and then people like Steve the Historian on YouTube actually making it accessible. I mean, you shouldn't have to learn it from a YouTube video. Like, your own city's history. It's disgusting. And that's why it's correlated with, like, mentioning of Centennial Mills and, again, the Lloyd District, right? And the Lloyd Center and the ice rink. Because this city the city itself does not care. The people do. The city government does never cared about its history. And they just pave it over. They just hand it over. And it's really wicked, stupid, and dumb. But anyway, and again, I'll link this article of mine in the description if you want to look at it. I have some of the old historic photos all the way up through now, obviously, or should say yesterday. Because I mean, this is from yesterday. It's what a fucking show out. Like, can you tell how impassioned, how much people care about the citizens of the city have always cared about the history and the cultural touchstones that we have, while our city government has never fucking cared at all. It's insane. Great. I love that. The WNBA, ironic, has a little man who claims to be a woman into the amateur women's league. This never happens, but it's happening. It does. A.B. Hernandez in high school and so many other fucking dudes pretending to be women and completely fucking stealing all of these girls' thunder. It's super sad. Anyway, I love just seeing, and as I always call him, Enes Kanter, because I'm a fucking child. But just seeing Enes Kanter. It's so funny. I do think that this is stupid far. I want to put that out right now since it's on the screen. The whole, like, Sophie Cunningham rally, I think, is kind of stupid. Because, like, I get, like, the idea is, oh, we want to support, you know, the stand she's making. Which, yeah, makes total sense. I'm 100% obviously with her when it comes down to the point she's made and the things that she said and the stand that she's taking. She's absolutely right. But, like, it feels so disingenuous to then hold these weird rallies and be like, we love you, Sophie Cunningham, and like all these people are buying like Indiana Fever gear and shit, because that's like their attempt at supporting Sophie and everything else. But it's like, it just feels so disingenuous to do this and be like, let's Sophie Cunningham rallies and let's buy Indiana Fever gear because we love what she said. Like, you can agree with what she said. You can even support what she said without doing this weirdly disingenuous, like, well, let's buy all of her gear, let's buy all of her shoes, let's buy all of this other stuff, let's buy Indiana Fever gear. We're suddenly Fever fans. Like, are you really Fever fans or are you Sophie Cunningham fans? Like, it just, that's why I don't like it, because it's disingenuous. It's super performative, which I don't like. And if you're going to be performative, be like Enes, I almost said Enes Kanter again. I am such a child. I have such a habit of calling him that. It's so stupid. It's not an insult, by the way. I just say that because I literally am a fucking stupid child in my head perpetually at this point. It's such low-hanging fruit. It's so easy to fucking do. But anyway, Enes Kanter, this is the kind of fucking petty you should be, right? Because that's exactly it, right? He's proving a fucking point is what he's trying to do. Is it performative? Yes, and that's also why I mention it, right? Enes Kanter, Royce White, they're being performative, yes, but they're doing the right kind of performativeness, and they're being the right kind of petty, where they're trying to be like, okay, your rules in the Women's National Basketball Association is that it needs Freudian slip, it needs is to identify and say, I identify as a female. Congratulations, you're now a woman in the Women's National Basketball League. That's literally the rule currently. So what Enes Kanter is doing, along with Royce White, is they're trying to prove a point. That's the point of the performance, is they're proving a point. Because they're forcing their hand to review the rules, which literally the commissioner of the WNBA came out as soon as Royce White specifically came out and after Enes Kanter and to declare for the WNBA draft, right? Because all that matters is identity in your rules. Okay, well, guess what? If they say they identify as women, then I guess they're women, right? Because remember, what is the biggest fucking rule and trope of all the pro-trans and the trans people out there? It is identity is what matters most. They throw biology out the window. They're like, all that matters is my identity. And I identify, don't dead name me, don't misgender me, because I identify as a woman, even though they're a man, biologically, right? There's your fucking problem. So let me quickly go to my profiling. And in fact, let me see here. Deflock. Right, okay. So, the ridicule is deserved and long overdue. It's genuinely funny. Correct. A very good stunt. Also correct. It won't be a one since alone. Yes, but again, this stunt by Enes Kanter and by Royce White is already working because, again, the WNBA is already announced that they're convening for this whole next week, to review their rules in response to them identifying as women, performatively, admittedly, and declaring for the WNBA draft. The only reason why they're doing that is because they want to exclude Enes Kanter and Royce White. They want to make sure they can absolutely exclude them no matter what, exactly because of the fact that they know they're men. They're former NBA players, right? These are proud dudes. They know that. They can see that they're men and not women. And they know it's performative. But they also know, and this is really the primary reason why they are convening on this now, and they're reviewing it, and want to box them both out and bar them from being able to actually even declare for the WNBA draft or be drafted or be signed to the WNBA, is exactly because it's horrifically poor optics. It is such bad optics if they allow them in. But in their current rules, since it's identity and not biology based, as long as they identify as women by the WNBA's own rules, because that's identity, right? They identify as women. They officially declare that. They can legally declare for the draft. They can legally be signed by any team in the WNBA as a player. It's already working in that regard. So, this brings me to this point I wanted to make. So, this is where it gets really fucked, right? Because they completely fucked themselves over with this stupid identity-based rule. Because if, this is the simplest way I could put it, so I could read it off, but I'm not going to. So if, effectively, in this convening, they decide they're going to disbar and bar off Royce White and Enes, damn it, Enes Kanter from being able to declare for the WNBA draft, and bar them from being able to be eligible to even play in the WNBA because they're men, despite the fact that it is identity they're using, which is the rule that allows them to do this. The issue with that is, it should be obviously clear. I mean, this is like child's play at this point. It's like explaining something to a toddler because you feel stupid when you do it for obvious reasons. Because it's that obvious, right? But that would mean if they bar them, that's what the rule change, right? Like, okay, you can't declare, and you cannot go into the WNBA draft, and you are not eligible to play in the WNBA. You're not eligible to sign a contract with the WNBA as a player because you're a man. That's a necessary rule change. That means that they are now, well, they have to choose. Because they can't be both. They have to choose one or the other. And that would indicate they have chosen to now officially acknowledge biology. Biological gender. Not gender identity. And then that's the rule. Is that you have to be biologically female. AKA, what the only thing is possible to be a female is in life. Biological females. Who would have thunk it? XY chromosomes, after all, is what makes you a female. But anyway, that would mean that people like Julie Tatar, or Tatart, a dude pretending to be a woman, and everyone's calling him a woman, and a she, and her, and Julie, that's not his actual name, obviously, because of the fact that he identifies as a female. He has for a long time. This is an older dude as well, Julie Tatart. But I can't remember his actual first name, his actual real male name, but his birth name. But yeah, so if they exclude Royce and Enes after this rule review, it means it's gone biological. Which means that now they cannot allow Julie Tatart to join the WNBA. Because you can't exclude two dudes who are identifying, even if it's performatively, they're even officially legally identifying as women, just so they can make you review your rules and prove to you how fucking stupid that rule is, that it's identity and not biology based. Because it's identity based, as long as you identify, and you, again, right, you can't dead name, you can't misgender. As long as the identity is, I identify as female, you have to accept that. That's the culture around this. Because otherwise you're doing all this stuff and it's traumatizing, and now you're you're attacking trans people, whatever else. This is a paradox, obviously, at that point, right? Because they're in a rock and a hard place now, the WNBA, because they're reviewing the rules. They can't do it that way, because if they do it that way, now all the trans of the TQ plus crowd is going to be absolutely never-endingly unglued. They're never going to ever let it go. They're going to constantly fucking shred them to pieces. They're never going to fucking support them again. And it's a huge piece of their business right now because they're so aggressively playing into the demographic. However, if they don't change it, then technically they have to let Enes Kanter and Royce White enter the WNBA draft next year, the 2027 WNBA draft, because they're now catering to that demographic that they've always catered to, which is that TQ plus group, right? And the identity obsessed people. So either way, they're going to be screwed. No matter what their decision is, no matter how they handle this, they're going to absolutely never live it down. And they did this to themselves. You cannot disbar those two from declaring for the WNBA draft, from being able to be eligible to be drafted, or to be signed as a player in the WNBA with the identity rule. If you're going to, say, draft or sign a trans person, a dude pretending to be a woman like Julie Tattart, you cannot do that. Because you'd be directly proving Enes's and Royce's point. My point. Tons of other people's points. John Pike's point. Right? So, no matter what, they've fucked themselves with this rule. And now this review. Because they want to box them out, Royce and Enes, but they can't do it without fucking the optics completely. And screwing themselves in the process. Massively. Because you bar those, you can't draft trans people anymore. You don't bar Enes and Royce, you're still screwed. Because you're still never going to live it down. Because either way, it still also proves exactly the point that Enes and Royce are trying to make. They're forcing the WNBA to grapple with and acknowledge. So, yeah, if they want to bar Enes and Royce, the only way they can do it is if they change the rule from identity-based to biological-based. Then they won't be able to be eligible to play, and they'll be against the rules, of course, for them to be able to be eligible for the draft or to be signed or to be a player at all in the WNBA. But that obviously fucks over people like Julie Tattart and the rest of the pro-trans crowd, because there's no, you can't do both sides. You cannot play both sides like that and then be like, well, but it's different here. It's like, but hang on. But if it's identity based, and this dude identifies Julie as a woman, clearly, what's the difference between somebody else doing that? Can you genuinely list something? That's right. You fucking can't. That's why you're holding a week-long powwow as the commissioner, right? And the deputy commissioner and all the rest of the board of governors of the WNBA, because you want to bar them, but you know you can't get away with it because it's going to force such a rule change that it's still going to contradict your entire main demographic you cater to, which is the TQ plus community. So they completely screwed themselves, and I find it to be absolutely hilarious because it was so obvious, and people had been saying this is going to happen eventually to you, and you're going to have to figure it out, and you're not going to like it because you're going to lose no matter what. It's a lose-lose situation if you're the WNBA. And Enes and Royce have forced their hand into now facing that reality. It's like they didn't want to face it before. They kept wanting to play games, and it's like, all right, okay, you want to say it's all about identity, and that's it. All right, cool, but you can't dead name me. You can't misgender me. Identify as a woman now. I'm declaring for your draft. What are you going to do about it? Figure it out. The ball's in your fucking court. And I love that. It's the only good kind of petty that exists. Because it forces an acknowledgement of something that the people do not want to acknowledge. And like I said, there's no way they can make a rule change here without alienating either the trans crowd, like the Julie Tattarts, or the other half of the demographics of the viewer base and the fan base in the WNBA. But it's still also absurd, as everybody keeps mentioning, that the W stands for Women's National Basketball Association. Yet they're now holding a week-long powwow to try to define what a woman is. Which is just disgustingly insane and hilarious to me. It's absolutely mind-boggling that we are living in this reality. It feels like a fucked up, upside down, inside out, backwards form of the Matrix. It's so screwy. It's so weird. And as somebody with a lot of schizophrenics in my family, it screams schizophrenic. It's the most ridiculous. It's like they're fighting with a mirror version of themselves or something. I cannot begin to fathom how wildly absurd this is. But this is why people call it a clown world. So, in a way, just for my own amusement, I would actually watch the WNBA if Enes Kanter and Royce White are playing, especially Enes. As Enes, I already like Enes just in general. He's actually a fun personality. Obviously, he played for here in Portland here for a little bit. I remember when he was drafted to the Utah Jazz, and he played as with the Stash Bros, if you remember that. They're called the Stash Bros. Him and Budget Aquaman, Steven Adams, when they were there. Or was it Steven Adams? No, wait, who was it? I swear it was Steven Adams, but no, he was actually originally drafted by... No, it was... That's right. He wasn't Stash Bros until he was in OKC. That's right. He started in Utah. He was drafted there. Then he got traded to OKC, and then it was him and Steven Adams in OKC. That was the Stash Bros. Fucking remember that really well. I think he's pretty funny. I like his personality. He's actually just a really fucking nice dude. He's always laughing and smiling. He's a generally happy person, and I love that for him. I love that for anybody. So I would actually, just because of the hilarity of it, the absurdity of it, the circus value and content of it, I really do want to be able to watch the WNBA if they're forced, and as in they realize they're being forced into having to, if they want Julie Tattart, they want these other trans players, right? And they really want to make that, they want to die on that hill, then I really hope that it forces their hand to let Enes and Royce play, because I am going to have so much fun watching the WNBA and watching those two dudes fucking look like magicians, look like gods on the fucking court, and absolutely ruin their entire glass tower that they've built for themselves, that they're constantly screaming out of. That's, this is transphobic. Fuck you, TERFs. It's going to be so fucking funny to watch. Their entire worldview just absolutely crumple like a hunk of hollow aluminum stuck in a fucking vacuum chamber. It's going to be so pleasing. But, anyway, so I wanted to talk about those two things too. Yeah, the WNBA's, they've had this coming for a long time, and it just took, admittedly, a performative and somewhat petty maneuver by both Royce White and Enes Kanter, there it is, Enes Kanter, to prove the point, to force them to face reality and grapple with the conundrum that they've forced themselves into. That said, that's all I really have to talk about in this live stream. I definitely went longer than I meant to go in this, but here's the dashboard. Actually, I thought it would be over 2 hours. It's under 2 hours. But hey, all good. I'm happy about it. And I went a little long on a couple of the topics, but for me, I've done pretty damn good. Again, feel free to check out my article about the Lloyd Center and a bit of its history, and kind of just a suggestion to URG and KREF, the owners and the redevelopers of Lloyd Center, about what they, I know it doesn't matter if they see it or not. Not going to matter, obviously. But that they you know, what they could do for completely free, that I talked about in this live stream, right? To be able to preserve the ice rink, at the very least, as a historic centerpiece for their new neighborhood. But outside of that, though, that is it for me. See you out there, and until next time, go fuck yourself. I hate you too. Go die. Listen, this is called compassion and understanding. You just wouldn't understand it. Also, feel free to check out the Off the Cuff podcast. It's at official OTC pod on YouTube here. Me and my buddy Sean talk about, well, pretty much anything and everything on the Off the Cuff podcast. It's a new episode once every 2 weeks on the channel. So go ahead and check that out if you want to. If you want something to kill time with, you want something to listen to, you want something to piss you off, to cause you to give you material to rant about, doesn't matter to us. Check it out. If you feel free to do so. It doesn't make any sense. And, close enough. And, yeah, feel free to check out my Cascadia Transit expansion project here on YouTube as well. I have to try to figure out how to remedy the fuck up I made with the KML files of Google Earth when I swapped to Linux. Because, yeah, I made a grave error there. And, yeah, I'll see you. Inception. See you later. I opened GIMP instead. Good motherfucking bye. Bitch.